A month or so ago, I put together a documentary on the Moonswatch and the history of the two brands that collaborated to put the watch together. Making that video reignited my interest in the Omega Speedmaster, as did owning the Moonswatch Jupiter and Earth models that featured. However, as a wearing experience, those are lightweight bioceramic models on NATO straps and not comparable with the real thing. Recently, I've sold off a lot of my watch collection and consolidated it into a single watch. I'll make a video on that in the future, but I'm trending towards a smaller, carefully curated watch collection, simply because, on a practical level, I only wear one watch at a time, and owning boxes and boxes full of watches doesn't leave any of them with a great deal of wrist time. Why am I telling you this? Well, I've been weighing up saving for a Speedmaster, but before fully committing, I wanted to get a better approximation of the daily wearing experience, hence the purchase of the PD-1701 from Pagani Design. The focus of this video is whether or not the PD-1701 deserves to earn itself a place in my collection. Is it good enough to avoid the excessive cost of buying the real thing? Now, I've mentioned in my previous video that I'm not the biggest fan of Homage watches, and that remains true. But we all have to live within our means, and the Pagani Design models are, if nothing else, affordable. Pagani Design was formed in 2012 and operates out of Guangzhou, China, but also produces models under the Pagani design name, which I would assume is a way of stepping delicately around issues involving calling a brand Pagani. Many people have a dim view of the brand online, as so little of their output is original. Not even the name is original. The watch itself arrived in a small, well-designed package, featuring a cleaning cloth and an extra NATO strap that I must confess I never used. It's a nice addition, but doesn't colour match, and this watch doesn't have quick release on the bracelet, so I wasn't interested in making the change. On the subject of packaging, in my last video I mentioned an issue with the plastic packaging that the watch itself arrived wrapped in. While I had no such issues with the Pagani, as you can see from this footage, Pagani seemed to have taken the plastic wrapping to the next level. This particular PD-1701 model certainly has a clear lineage of inspirations. It's based on the Mission to Mars Moonswatch, which itself is based on the Project Alaska Speedmaster model from Omega. I've gone over those watches in depth in my Moonswatch retrospective, so I won't repeat myself here, but you're more than welcome to give that a look if you want more information. The PD-1701 is considerably cheaper than either of these watches, coming in between £50 and £100 depending on the sale and the colour variation that you go for. For that, you're getting stainless steel construction, synthetic sapphire, a VK63 quartz movement from Seiko, a screw-down crown, ceramic bezel inserts, lume and 100 meters of waterproofing. As far as the watch goes, it's a solid set of specifications for the price point. That much is undeniable. The watch is advertised as 40mm in diameter and 14mm thick, which is a close approximation of the sizing of the Speedmaster caliber 321. As I've said many times on the channel, I'd prefer something smaller, but the on-wrist experience isn't too bad in terms of sizing for me with this watch. Of all of the models I've ever purchased from AliExpress, this is right up there with my San Martin World Timer in terms of build quality. Nothing is flimsy, there are no sharp edges, the finishing is solid, and the bracelet in particular is really impressive. I've found that a fair few bracelets have been thin, rattle a lot, and feel very light. This by comparison is heavy duty and features a smaller than usual clasp with 3 points of adjustment, so you can pretty much guarantee a comfortable fit for most wrist sizes. Not only that, but there's a slight taper to this bracelet, which might not sound like much, but is preferable, and again another small detail that's been considered even for this very low price point. You're also getting a mixture between brushed and polished surfaces with the mini links this bracelet features. This gives the effect of darting light as you move your wrist. Again, just a really nice touch. If you're not a fan of this particular colourway, there are a lot more on offer. The range includes white and black Pepsi models, the Mission to Mars with a black bezel, Panda models, light blue models, a blue version of the Mission to Mars, ones that closely resemble the Moonwatch, and many more besides. Should you want to branch out further, they also have a range designed to mimic the 57 Speedmaster model range. It is worth noting that some of these models are older than others. Pagani Design advertised 5 versions of these Speedmaster Homages, with incremental improvements made each time. What you're seeing in the video is a version 5 model that has a slightly higher price point than some of the older ones. You can pick up the earlier models now for as little as £30, but with all of these you need to factor in discounts, sales, shipping and taxes, some of which can fluctuate fairly wildly. In terms of strengths and weaknesses, I think the loom is probably the biggest issue with the watch. To call it underwhelming would actually be quite generous, but given the huge specs for the low price, I don't think this is really the end of the world. I think the issue itself is compounded by the small size of the loomed areas, as well as the quality of the luminous material itself. You can see from this time-lapse footage that it doesn't hold up very well. Now, I was also a little bit concerned with the engraved pattern on the watch caseback. I've had some very uncomfortable experiences with some cheaper executions of engraved watch casebacks from other brands that sell their wares on AliExpress. But there were no issues at all here. It's comparatively smooth to the touch and not something that you can even notice on wrist. As far as the watch's biggest strength goes, it looks great. The Speedmaster itself looks fantastic, and this is about as close as you can get, so that really isn't an accident. Where the 1701 deserves praise is just how close in aesthetics and materials it has managed to get for this price point. Now, of course, there are many tangible details which separate the two, but imagine a world where you wore a Speedmaster to work every day. This would be a decent enough substitute as a beater watch for the beach, sports or other pastimes where you wouldn't feel comfortable wearing the real deal. Another point to highlight as a real strength is that ceramic bezel. It really elevates the quality of the overall product and looks so much better than it has any right to for how much it costs. It does pick up a lot of fingerprint marks though, so that's one slight drawback. The little pieces of attention to detail don't end there. The subdials are also fantastic. Not only do they add a great deal of depth to the dial, but they themselves are concave down into concentric circles below the themed hands. What these excellent subdials do though is highlight the lack of depth in the rest of the dial. I think some work with the indices or markers would have elevated this, but for the price it's really hard to complain. When I review models like this, the feedback tends to be quite polarizing. Either dismissive as the watch is a homage, or defensive because the watch is so cheap and offers so much for the price point. So as with any review, it's impossible to keep everyone happy. Instead, I'd pose this question: when do you think a homage watch stops being a homage? It feels like modern watch design is either becoming very homogenized or so out there to fight against it that you wouldn't actually wear the model day to day. So where do you draw the line? Are you happy to wear homages, or will only the real deal do? Now, the conclusion to this video is perhaps one that might not make immediate sense, because I'm not going to be keeping this watch, but it has very little to do with its own merits. I think as a watch this does very little wrong besides being a homage, and how big of a flaw that is really depends on your own perspective. Perhaps the biggest compliment that I can pay to this model is that it's made my mind up. I want the real thing. And because of that, I'm going to sell this watch to help fund that dream. It won't be a huge contribution towards the fund, I know, but you've got to start somewhere. For those of you less fussed about the homage issue, I would absolutely recommend this. Certainly, it's a much better value proposition than the Moonswatch range. As ever, thank you for watching. I know that I desperately need to learn more about the YouTube algorithm, naming videos and when to upload them for the channel to really grow, and that's something I will get around to, but any suggestions on that front are greatly appreciated. I just wanted to say that regardless of how the videos do, your viewership and support is greatly appreciated. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more content like this.